A government almost never admits it cannot pay. It simply changes what money means and calls the arithmetic settled. A currency holds its value until the debt behind it grows too large to honor at the rate it promised. A promise to pay in gold holds until paying it would empty the vault. Welcome to Financial Historian. He is not a banker and not a prophet, only a witness who keeps returning to this window at a different hour of the same argument. On the sill beside him, the dust holds a small round absence, the exact width of a coin that is no longer there. A coin is only a promise made of metal, and metal, unlike a promise, cannot be talked out of what it weighs. Below him, the district is only beginning to dim as evening settles over the towers. You read this pattern in this morning's rate decision without naming it. A number moved, and no one asked what it was actually a promise to do. The savings you assume no government can touch are only as safe as the rule that currently defines what a savings account is. Below the window, in a city that could be this one, a line is already forming outside a bank whose doors have not yet opened for the day. That line outside the bank is not a metaphor. It is London, 1797, and the doors have not opened yet. War is draining the country's gold across the channel, coin by coin, faster than the vaults can refill. On the sill by the hero rests a single gold coin, kept there as proof the bank still means what it prints. Every banknote in this hall is a promise. Bring it back, and the counter hands you gold in exchange. This morning, that promise breaks its own rule, not by refusal, but by a single word: wait. The Bank of England has just told its own creditors to hold their notes and stop asking for gold. No panic in the hall, only pens still moving. Outside, the queue at the doors is no longer waiting to deposit. It is waiting to be told what its notes are still worth. She holds banknotes that were, an hour ago, as good as the coin in anyone's pocket. The hero touches the ring on his finger, the way he always will, in the moment an institution gives its word. This wait was not measured in weeks. It ran 24 years before the promise was paid in full. And once an institution learns it can ask its creditors to wait, it never fully forgets that it can ask again. It never fully forgets that it can ask again, and for a while, remarkably, it does not have to. In 1821, the Bank of England makes good on the wait. Notes are exchanged for gold again, at the old rate, no discount, no excuse. 24 years after the promise was suspended, it is kept in full. The queue that once waited outside those doors finally gets its answer. The rule had been kept once, which is exactly why no one thought to ask what would happen the next time it could not be. For most of the century, currencies the world over tie themselves to the same metal, the classical gold standard. A rule kept for a century looks less like a promise, more like a law of nature. A war costs more than any before it. When it ends, the old rule goes back where it was. Britain returns to gold in 1925 at the pre-war rate, as though the war had never happened to its debts. But the debts of a world war are not the debts of 1821. The weight is new. The seam is the same. Through the decade, governments abandon the gold standard. Germany, then Britain, then others. No single villain signs the order each time. The same pressure keeps finding the same weak joint, capital after capital. But a promise kept once is not a promise proven, and by 1944 the stakes had grown far past one bank's word. By 1944, the question was no longer one bank's word. It was the word of every treasury on earth. 44 nations sent delegates to a resort in New Hampshire to decide together what money would mean after the war. Where a queue of depositors once stood at a bank's locked doors, there now stood a line of cars flying 44 flags. The crowd had not vanished. It had been given a seat at the table, a title, and a folder to carry. The agreement they signed fixed the dollar to a set weight of gold and fixed every other currency to the dollar. One anchor, one promise, and every economy on that map now rode on how well one nation kept its word. A promise binding one bank is a local matter. A promise binding the world is a debt the world agreed never to watch too closely. Near the door, under glass, one gold coin sat now, not spent, only shown. A promise that binds the world, they said, is a debt no one watches closely. That silence lasted only 27 years. August of 1971. Outside this window, an ordinary street. A delivery truck idling, a newspaper stand, nothing that looks like history. On his desk, a government official squares a short statement. He calls the gold window a technical adjustment. The gold window closes. A temporary measure, they say. It never reopens. Not once, not for any president after him. On the sill where the coin once sat, only a pale imprint remains on the paper beneath it. Not the coin, its ghost. And for the first time, the witness does not touch his ring. There is no promise left to feel for. Below, the street the witness watched has not changed a single storefront, which is exactly the point of calling it temporary. No queue formed outside this window. That was the quiet part. This time, nobody needed to wait in line to notice. State it plainly. The promise was always conditional, good for exchange only until exchange became too expensive to honor. Sit in that discomfort. No comfort follows, and none was ever promised. In a boardroom decades later, an analyst studies the same loophole. Not whether it bends, only how fast, who gets paid first. That lever gets used again in 2020, in a hall with no ledgers at all. A central bank adds a figure to a reserve account. No coin moves, no vault door opens. In 1797, explaining where money came from took a war, a queue, and 24 years. Here, the same act takes an afternoon and barely a headline. The scale changed, the pattern did not. A rule gets rewritten quietly and called routine. So the question was never whether the system would collapse. It was always when the rule would be rewritten, and who would quietly absorb the cost. The hall empties. The witness walks back toward the window where he started. At the sill of the first window, the pale outline of the coin is still there, and his ring finger finds nothing to touch. Money is stable until the rule changes. 1797, 1971. Now your account. So which rule about your money would you actually notice being rewritten? History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.